What's up, Buckeye Nation? Thanks for tuning in. Ohio State football with Scarlet and Great right here on YouTube. Your host, Corey Thompson, Floco, here today going solo. Guys, we got a big one coming up. Big Ten football's on the horizon. We got Wisconsin at Ohio State at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Saturday, and I love this matchup every year. I love playing Wisconsin. I guess you can say mainly because we beat them all the time, but I love their style of play, and I actually have a lot of a great respect for Paul Chryst and the Wisconsin program. And one of those things I have respect for about Wisconsin is this: is that they know who they are, they have an identity, they have a style. And we'll get into that, but they don't try to reach a little higher than really. They don't. I'll put this: they don't reach higher than they should. They don't their eyes are not bigger than their stomach. I've seen so many programs like Duke or Ole Miss or whatever, they'll end up firing coaches that get them to a good place, and because they think they should take that next level, and then they end up falling backwards. And Wisconsin really doesn't do that, to be honest with you. And Wisconsin's generally a very formidable program, and I have a lot of respect for them. But anyway, guys, again, Wisconsin at Ohio State, 7:30 p.m. Eastern at ABC. Make sure you're there. I know you'll be watching. But I think there's an interesting matchup here because we're going to talk about the Wisconsin offense versus the Ohio State defense this go around. Next video will be in the reverse: Ohio State offense versus Wisconsin defense. It's going to be interesting to see exactly how we match up. And I've been looking at a few things here, and I want to discuss on this video. So anyway, the Wisconsin offense versus the Ohio State defense. This is an interesting matchup because remember last year, part of the reason why we got a new defensive coordinator in Jim Knowles is because Michigan, and I understand that I'm talking about Wisconsin now, but Michigan ran rough shit over us when Hassan Haskins ran for 5 touchdowns. We couldn't stop the run. It was embarrassing. It was ridiculous. I think Wisconsin provides the opportunity to kind of prepare for that matchup. I know the offenses are different, the styles are different, but it provides that opportunity because we know what the Wisconsin identity is, right? We know what they're going to do. Wisconsin identity, they run the football. That's who they are. That's who they're always going to be. And that's fine. But that provides a good test early in the season to see how maybe we can stack up against a potential Michigan attack later on in the year because they devastated us last year with that. Can we come back and start to stop the run against teams that we know are going to run the football on us? Now, granted, Michigan's got a whole other ways to attack you. I get all that. I get those arguments. We'll talk about that later in the year. But right now, it'll be interesting to see if we talk about a team that knows we know what they're going to do. Can we stop it? So hit that like button, by the way, if you want to see good revenge on Michigan later in the year, and that this can and hit that like button if you think this could provide a really good test against possibly the Michigan running attack coming up later in the year. But anyway, let's go over some of the top playmakers Wisconsin has. Uh, there's a few guys that we want to talk about here. Let's talk about quarterback Graham Mertz. Remember, he came in as a 5-star. Ohio State wanted him really bad. He's started for a couple of years now, and you can argue and debate whether or not he's actually lived up to the hype or not. I think he's a solid quarterback. He's not great, spectacular, or whatever. Um, I'm happy with CJ Stroud to say the least, so we're pretty good there. But he's 71% on the completion percentage on the year. That's a typical Wisconsin thing. They throw safe passes. They're not really a downfield team. You'll see that in here in a second. I mean, they can make big plays in the passing game, but typically speaking, they're not a team that's going to go downfield on you all the time. They're not a vertical team necessarily. But they had 697 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions in 3 games. The running game is really obviously the formidable foe with Wisconsin, that what you have to stop. And Braleon Allen's a really good running back. And he's at 6.6 yards per carry, 332 yards, and 5 touchdowns. That's where the bread and butter is going to be for Wisconsin. That's where you're going to want. That's who you're going to have to key in on. But the interesting thing about they spread the ball around in the receiving game, in the repassing game. I can't say these names perfectly. I probably Shamari Dyke or DK or however you say his name. I apologize. Is 9 catches for 172 yards, 1 touchdown. But the interesting thing, he's a leading receiver. But the interesting thing is, Skylar Bell is the tied for second leading receiver with 8 catches, 172 yards, or 146 yards, I apologize, and 2 touchdowns. And they also involve their tight end. That's a typical Wisconsin staple as well. It doesn't matter who the coach is, from Barry Alvarez to Gary Anderson or Burt Bielema or whatever. Brett Bielema, is it Burt Bielema? I don't know anymore. I can't remember his name. I know he's coaching Illinois now. To Brett Bielema, to Gary Anderson, to now Paul Chryst. It's just doesn't matter. We run the ball, we spread the ball around a little bit, and we go to the tight end. Clay Cundiff, I'm sorry, 8 catches, 139 yards, 2 touchdowns. Um, And obviously, Wisconsin's known for the really good offensive line. So I was actually looked up the preseason Big Ten, all Big Ten players, and they only had one guy as a second team preseason All Big Ten was Joe Tippmann, and an interior offensive lineman. So I thought that was a little bit interesting. But those are I could as far as I could key in on are the best playmakers for Wisconsin. And I know what many of you are thinking right now when you think about this team. It's like, well, they've lost to Washington State. How hard should they be? This is college football, guys. You know this, right? You know that it is dramatic every week. You can't take one week and judge the next week by it. Look at what happened with Notre Dame and Ohio State. Notre Dame gave Ohio State fits. It was a tough game. Honestly, there was a little while in that game we thought maybe we could even lose that game, but then we think, man, Notre Dame's a really good team. They're going to be really good this year. Next week they flop and lose to Marshall. I mean, it's just like, okay, you can't judge one week from the other. And by the way, that Marshall team that beat Notre Dame then loses to Bowling Green the very next week. So I wouldn't take a loss against Washington State too seriously going forward, because obviously Wisconsin to salvage their season, this is gonna be their Super Bowl, obviously, and it's opening Big Ten play, and they want to compete in the Big Ten West. Um, but I looked at that loss to Washington State, and it was kind of interesting. You start to say to yourself, what happened in that game? How did they lose to such a not a great team in Washington State? And quite frankly, I looked at the box score, looked at the stats, some highlights, and I can't quite. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you look at the stats, but it's almost like there's a few little things that you can look at. Now, you say, okay, well, what happened here? It's Wisconsin won the time of possession, 38 minutes to 21 minutes. I mean, that's what they do. They grind you out. They love to hold on to the ball. They love to play ball control offense and just keep in their and focus on their defense, which is really good. And we'll focus on the next video. But they outgained Washington State by 150 yards. I mean, they didn't have like an amazing offensive performance. They only gained 401 yards on the day, which is a solid day. Don't get me wrong, but as spoiled Ohio State fans, let's be honest, if they did that, we would probably, if Ohio State did 401 yards, we'd think something really wrong, wouldn't we? So they 401 yards to around 250 yards for Washington State. So their defense did their job. They held Washington State in check for the most part. So when they gained 401 yards, you'd think, okay, they're dominating, right? And here's another stat that I found interesting. Wisconsin was 8 of 15 on third down. That's really good. That's, over 50% on third down is really good. And to Washington State was only 2 for 11 on third down. You see these things and you're like, how in the heck did Washington State beat this team? Well, there's a couple things that went wrong for Wisconsin. And there was 2 missed field goals. There's your win right there. They lost 17-14 to Washington State. They make those and they win the game. Albeit it'll be a close. They just edge it out, but it's a win is a win, and that's the difference between winning and losing when you can convert those field goals. But they also had 3 turnovers, which is the same as Washington State, but it's kind of unlike Wisconsin. Usually a pretty disciplined team. They had an interception and 2 fumbles lost. I actually had another fumble that they didn't lose that Mertz fell on, but again, it's kind of unlike Wisconsin to be that sloppy with the ball. And then, of course, you had 11 penalties for 106 yards. Guys, I mean, that's like 56 more penalty yards than what Washington State had. I mean, they just had timely miscues that just kept them from winning the game. And even though they were up 14-7 at one time. So, I mean, it's just, it's kind of fluky, I would say, them losing that game. But it'll be interesting to see who the more disciplined team is on Saturday. Ohio State did a really good job against Toledo with limiting penalties, and obviously we haven't been turning the ball over, but we haven't been creating turnovers either. So we're going to have to make sure that we convert our field goals. You got to make everything count with Wisconsin, because sometimes they're really good at converting that or keeping the ball out of people like CJ Stroud's hands with their run game. I think what you're going to see from Ohio State's defense is more of the same. There's no reason to really change it. I think actually this defense might even be tailor-made to Wisconsin's offense. You're just going to keep it aggressive. Mertz isn't very mobile. He's got negative yardage on the year. He's not exactly Daquan Finn who can run around and make you miss 100 times and then, lob a 50-yard bomb. But Mertz is a solid quarterback. I'm not taking anything away from him, but he's definitely not the guy, doesn't have the mobility with Daquan Finn. So I'd expect to see more sacks and more pressure going forward. But of course, Wisconsin's offensive line obviously should be better than Toledo's. We're gonna have our safeties close to the box. I could definitely see the corners back on the island. Jim Knowles is still maintaining his confidence in Denzel Burke, even though he hasn't played well. And I hopefully Cam Brown will be healthy, but I could definitely see our corners still on an island. keep the safeties close to mainly stop that run game because they're averaging about 4.8 yards per carry. We're allowing 2.6 yards per carry on the season. So it's kind of strength versus strength. They like to grind it out, obviously, with their run game. They have a really good stable running backs, led by Braleon Allen, as I mentioned earlier. It'll be interesting to see what in the world I would be interesting to see if we did anything else. And they also run the ball 62% of the time. So I don't think we're going to do anything other than try to stop that run, take away their bread and butter, and make Mertz beat you. I'm not saying he's not capable of beating you, but I'd rather bet on that than them grinding out the clock. They're actually an efficient passing team. They're like fifth in the nation in team passing efficiency. So it's not like Mertz can't hurt you, but pick your poison. I'd rather pick the passing game for Wisconsin. They'll probably allow a few big plays. The receivers are averaging like 17 and 19 yards per catch. I could see definitely a downfield pass here and there that hurt us. The tight end, obviously, we haven't had a whole lot of luck against in recent history. Of course, Notre Dame's tight end didn't hurt us that bad, but still, that's just one game. It'd be interesting to see if we actually slow down the tight end a little bit. But anyway, I'm actually excited to see this matchup with our defense versus Wisconsin's offense. I think as I've said, I think our defense is a little bit more tailor made to play this offense going forward. It's more aggressive, it's more physical up front. The front seven is excellent. With the safeties are playing great in the box. You're going to see guys like Lathan Ransom playing cleanup, making sure there's no big plays from the running attack. If we can limit those big plays in the run game, that bodes well for Ohio State. And I think they will because our tackling's been pretty solid. Other than the Toledo game against DeQuan Finn, I totally get it. That's a little bit of a special circumstance. But go ahead and subscribe, guys, if you're excited to see Ohio State's new defense, Jim Knowles' new defense against this classic Wisconsin offense in this matchup. And guys, I look forward to it. The next video will be about Ohio State's offense versus Wisconsin's defense. Appreciate you tuning in as always, guys. As always, goodbye, God bless, and go Bucks.